Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Thursday, July 3rd, 2025. This is USA Today's The Excerpt. Today, the latest on Trump's megabill as House lawmakers continue working, plus breaking down the verdict in Diddy's trial. And LGBTQ plus youth are twice as likely to be homeless. House Republicans have cleared a key procedural hurdle to get President Trump's signature legislative bill to his desk by a self-imposed July 4th deadline tomorrow. The House started debating Trump's legislative package of tax reductions and Medicaid cuts yesterday, but Republican leaders struggled to chart a path to victory with their narrow majorities in Congress. The House later voted 219 to 213 to move forward, setting up a final vote of yes or no on Trump's domestic agenda, ending taxes on tips and overtime, cutting Medicaid, and bolstering border security. Still, the vote doesn't guarantee the bill will succeed, since several lawmakers who oppose its $3.3 trillion price tag are still seeking changes as of early this morning. You can stay up on all the latest with usatoday.com. A verdict was delivered yesterday in the weeks-long trial of Sean Diddy Combs. I spoke with USA Today national correspondent Marco Della Cava for more. And a heads up, Marco had to join me while in transit, so apologies for the choppy audio. Thank you for joining me, Marco.
Hey, thanks for having me and talking about this.
All right, so as for the verdict itself, what did we hear, and I guess what sentencing might Diddy now face?
The jury took 3 days to deliberate, and Sean Combs basically got a pretty light verdict as it goes. Essentially, he was facing life in prison for racketeering, but that charge did not stick, and the jury just found him guilty on essentially crossing state lines for prostitution.
What did we hear from witnesses throughout this trial, Marco, some of whom really put themselves and their intimate stories out there on the stand?
Throughout the many weeks of testimony, we heard essentially horrific stories from women about the abuse they suffered at the hands of Sean Combs. At the same time, many of these same women confessed that they loved him and did want to spend time with him and were eager to really try and win him over. But at the same time, the defense teased out of many of them essentially admissions that they really loved this man and they were really hoping to get him to commit to a serious relationship. And as a result of that desire, they went ahead with a lot of his wishes, which included them having sex with multiple other men. Often they cried on the stand. A couple of them testified anonymously. These were obviously people who are really shaken, if not broken, by these experiences with this man. But in the end, obviously, the jury did not feel that they were forced to do anything per se, even if many of them said, I felt in fear of my life and certainly in fear of my career disappearing if I said anything, if I brought this up. So, in a sense, it's really something that is going to cause future witnesses in cases like this to think twice.
As for the defense approach to this case, I know you and I have previously talked about their concessions, essentially, that, Diddy was no saint. They kept leaning in on these claims. Was that part of their strategy in the waning days of this trial? And how did they also attempt to discredit the witnesses who testified?
The defense essentially was saying that the witnesses were in a relationship with Combs and they knew what they were getting into, and therefore this is not a criminal issue.
You write about the Me Too movement in this piece, Marco. What might be the legacy of the Diddy trial in the context of Me Too?
Essentially, it's far different from R. Kelly. It's far different from Harvey Weinstein. It's essentially vindication for Sean Combs that he might have an extreme lifestyle. He might actually be an abuser, but that the government, in a sense, cannot charge him with criminal activities in relationship to the way he lived his life. That many people feel will essentially cast a shadow over other future cases where women would maybe hesitate now to come forward and share their very painful stories with the world through court testimony.
Marco Della Cava is a national correspondent with USA Today. Thanks, Marco.
Thank you.
A federal judge has blocked President Donald Trump's asylum ban at the U.S.-Mexico border, saying Trump exceeded his authority when he issued a proclamation declaring illegal immigration an emergency and setting aside existing legal processes. The judge's opinion stated that Trump's January proclamation blocking all migrants engaged in the invasion across the southern border, as he put it, from claiming asylum or other humanitarian protections went beyond his executive power. The American Civil Liberties Union brought the challenge to Trump's asylum ban in February, arguing it violated American laws and international treaties. Trump's border restrictions went beyond a similar ban put in place by former President Joe Biden in 2024. Key parts of the Biden ban were blocked by a separate federal judge in a lawsuit also led by the ACLU. Since Trump took office, the number of migrants caught crossing the border illegally has dropped to record lows. Gilmar Abrego Garcia experienced severe beatings and psychological torture in a notorious high-security prison in El Salvador after he was deported by the Trump administration, according to a new court filing. The filing in federal court yesterday also says that Abrego Garcia experienced severe sleep deprivation and nutrition so inadequate that he lost 31 pounds while he was at the Terrorism Confinement Center, also known as CICOT, in El Salvador. The new details from Abrego Garcia's treatment at CICOT come as part of a lawsuit filed by his wife against the Trump administration, which is seeking to have the matter thrown out because he has since been returned to the United States. An indictment accuses Abrego Garcia of conspiring to bring immigrants into the U.S. illegally from various Central and South American countries. He has pleaded not guilty. LGBTQ+ youth are twice as likely to be homeless. I spoke with USA Today youth mental health reporting fellow Rachel Hale to learn more. Rachel, thanks for hopping on.
Thanks for having me.
So let's establish some of the data here at the top. What portion of young people experiencing homelessness are LGBTQ+, and how likely are LGBTQ+ youth to be homeless?
Though they make up 7% of the youth population, LGBTQ youth account for 40% of the young people experiencing homelessness in the United States. And as a category, LGBTQ youth are more than twice as likely to experience homelessness as their peers.
All right, so why is this, Rachel? What are contributing factors here?
Part of it is that LGBTQ young people are less likely to access mental health care than their peers, partially because of affordability, but a lot of teens also cite not wanting to obtain permission from a parent. And we know that the largest cited reason in reports for homelessness from queer youth are people saying that they were shut out and rejected by their families.
So tell us about some of the young people you spoke with, Rachel, for this piece and their challenges with homelessness.
So I spoke with some people who were younger and other people who had come out of the system years ago and were worried that the same stigma still existed or that enough hasn't been done to address the problem in those years since. One of those people was Eden Campbell McCollum. He told me that as a young person at 18 years old, he aged out of the foster care system and was sleeping on the number 7 train in New York each night. He would take the subway to his job at Burger King and spent a lot of nights looping its route to Flushing. So it was the only place where he could get heat that provided kind of a brief break from New York City's winters. So again, someone who dealt with systemic issues coming out of the foster care system. But what complicated things is that he also had confusion about his gender identity. He didn't know any transgender people at the time. This would have been in the 1980s, and didn't have the language to describe what he was experiencing, but he knew he was different and that his parents wouldn't have accepted him. Someone one night saw him falling asleep on the train and connected him to Covenant House, one of the shelters in New York that was able to offer him care. But too many people are still going through the same thing that he experienced.
Wow. Well, as for this moment specifically, Rachel, how are young members of this community navigating this climate under President Donald Trump and some of his administration's cuts?
Advocates say that concerns for queer homeless youth are really heightened right now. Most recently, on June 17th, the administration instructed the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline to end its specialized services for LGBTQ youth within the next month. Nearly 1.3 million young LGBTQ people have used support from that hotline since its launch in 2022. A day later, the Supreme Court also upheld Tennessee's ban on gender affirming care for minors. So there's a number of things that have changed in the current administration that have led people to have additional concern about visibly being queer and also about seeking LGBTQ specific care.
What's the answer here? I mean, is there a solution to this devastating problem?
I think that advocates who have been through this system are always trying to think of what that answer looks like. But one thing that the people I spoke with kept coming back to was that the services they accessed at these youth shelters were really vital. So, for example, Eden told me that making sure that young homeless people are having access to life skills building programs. So, looking at how a checking account works and what it means to have a statement come through every month from your credit card, just those basic things that you might not learn growing up. Another thing that Eden said is that accessing queer spaces in their youth were really important, communities where there are other LGBTQ youth, and life skill specific training are two really important things. And also, amid current changes in the administration, continuing to make sure that there are spaces where LGBTQ youth feel welcome.
All right, another great piece from you, Rachel. Rachel Hale covers youth mental health for USA Today. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you so much.
Clayton Kershaw has joined an exclusive club. The longtime Los Angeles Dodgers ace last night became the 20th pitcher in Major League Baseball history to strike out 3,000 batters. You can read more about his storied career and why his manager called him a unicorn with a link in today's show notes. The U.S. men's national soccer team took down Guatemala last night 2-1 to make the Gold Cup final. They'll take on Mexico on Sunday after Mexico beat Honduras last night in the nightcap. You can follow along with USA Today Sports. And later today, can an AI chatbot be your therapist? Some bots are masquerading as licensed therapists and are failing in dangerous ways.
The challenge is that because these AI chatbots are not being monitored by humans who know what good mental health care is, they go rogue and they say very harmful things.
Bill Wright, a psychologist with the American Psychological Association, sat down with my colleague Dana Taylor to discuss the real-world implications of unmonitored AI therapists and what can be done to make them better. You can catch that conversation later today, beginning at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for listening to The Excerpt. You can get the podcast wherever you get your audio, and as always, you can find us on email at podcasts@usatoday.com. I'm Taylor Wilson. I'll be back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.